Hey there, we have like eons of stories to tell, so if you want to follow us along on this journey and keep up with all the stories that we have putting out, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. Hey, what is up everybody? Chad is here, and I know I've been slacking on the videos, but I've just been having so much going on, trying to like get all this stuff like up and ready to move. It's a hassle. I hate moving time. It sucks so much. But today we're going to be continuing with Injustice, right? So last we left off, right, Superman had just killed his wife and his kid, right? He killed both of them because of the Joker. You know, he smacked him with the fear toxin, and it basically made him, you know, start seeing hallucinations, right? He lost his mind. You know, he went and killed Lois Lane because he thought it was Doomsday, and eventually he, like, you know, he got like really pissed off to the point where he went and stuck his hand right through the chest of the Joker, right? And after that, he just started shutting down everything. He called an entire ceasefire on the entire world, and everywhere there was war, everywhere where there was, like, you know, like people getting killed and stuff like that, he went and shut it down, right? So here we pick up in the Batcave, right? Dick Grayson, you know, he's like training Damian Wayne, and he's basically like trying to get Damian Wayne to stop being so aggressive, right? Because when it comes to Damian Wayne, he's a killer, okay? He's not like Batman, okay? He's not gonna just, you know, beat the crap out of you and then ask questions. He's gonna kill you, right? If he don't need information from you, he's gonna kill you, right? It's basically like that kind of thing, right? And eventually, you know, Damian Wayne, he gets pissed off and like throws his little baton at Dick Grayson, right? And, you know, he's up catching it. That'll come back later, you know, just remember that stuff. And eventually Superman shows up, right? And he's asking Dick Grayson, you know, like where's Batman? You know, he's basically asking for Batman. And eventually, you know, like Dick Grayson, he tells where Batman is. And, you know, he's trying to, you know, checking up on Superman. You know, like, Superman, are you alright? You know, like stuff like that. You know, Superman's just like, yeah, I'm good. And eventually, he walks up to Batman, right? So this is I love this conversation so much, right? Because it's so powerful, right? So Superman, he walks up, right? And he's like, his first questions were, where were you, right? Because when his parents got like kidnapped, Batman wasn't helping him look, right? You know, like Superman and all the Justice League, they were looking for Superman's parents, right? You know, Jonathan and Martha. And basically, Batman wasn't helping him. He went to the president, right? And, you know, he was talking to the president. So he like starts telling him about that, right? And like Batman, he's just telling Superman, like, you have to stop this, right? You can't, you know, you can't interfere with their lives. You have to let, you know, nature run its course, right? You have to let these people do what they do. You can't just, you know, shut down all of war, you know, stuff like that, right? And eventually, he's like, okay, they should be scared to do this stuff, right? Like, I know I'm scaring them. I'm putting fear in their hearts. I'm making them scared to push the button. They should be, right? They shouldn't even get the thought in their mind to actually want to press that button. They shouldn't get the thought in their mind to want to kill these people, right? You know, stuff like that, right? He's like, why did you let him do this to me, Bruce? And Batman's just like, he's like shocked, right? Because like to hear that come from your best friend, the fact that you haven't killed this guy, the reason the Joker actually was able to do that is because Batman never kills him, right? You know, like he never actually takes him out the game, right? There's this one part in Daredevil, right? So if you've seen the Daredevil show, I just watched it for like the first time last week. That show is amazing. It is so good. Oh my god, the part where Punisher comes in, right? And like him and Matt Murdock are like talking on the roof. He's like, okay, every time you hit them, you know, a day or a week or something go by and they get right back up. I put them down and they stay down. It's just like that, right? Like if Batman were to kill this guy, right? I don't think he'd go to jail. I don't think he'd go to jail, right? Because like he'd be saving thousands of people. Like, cause every time the Joker goes on one of his little rampages, right? You know, he starts messing stuff up. He starts hiding like bombs over the city and stuff like that. Hundreds of people die, right? So if Batman were to actually just like, you know, stop him for good, he'd be saving a pretty chunky amount of the population, right? And I don't think anybody would be mad about that, right? So Superman, he actually did it, and Batman, you know, he's just like, okay, yeah, you can't do that though, right? We have to leave this up to the law, right? Like, yeah, we can't be, you know, the judge, jury, and executioner, right? We just have to, you know, stop these people, you know, when they do stuff, do bad stuff, right? And eventually it comes to the point where Superman starts talking about his family, right? And Superman, he's just like, yeah, I had a wife, right? I was about to have a family. I was about to have a kid. And, you know, like he starts telling Batman about his family, right? Like, yeah, your parents left you. They died. Like, and you're just sitting here. You're just ignoring Dick and Damian. Like, you're over here on your computers and they want to, you know, spend time with their dad, you know, stuff like that, right? And eventually Batman, he gets pissed off, right? Like, he gets so pissed off, he goes and punches Superman and breaks his own hand, right? He literally goes and breaks his own hand, right? So, with that happening, right, you know, like Superman, he checks him out, you know, he sees that he has like a little fracture in his hand, and eventually an alert goes off, right? So this alert, right, this alert is basically an attack from Atlantis, right? Aquaman, he's like, you know, calling all his forces to go, you know, invade these different countries, right? Like he's literally like, you know, calling for war on the surface people, right? So this is to the point where like Batman, you know, he starts telling Superman, you know, like how about his morality, you know, stuff like that, right? So Superman, he's just like, okay, if you were in my position, if you could do the stuff that I did, you would be doing the same thing. And Batman's just like, you're right, I definitely would be, but you're better than me, right? You're the symbol of hope. When people look at, when people think of hope, they see you. They don't see me. They think of fear when they see me. They think of fear when they see me, right? So they start talking about, like the war in Atlantis, and they're basically like getting ready to go, right? So Superman, he's like asking Bruce to go with him, and Bruce is just like, no, I can't go with you. I don't agree with what you're doing. I can't go with you. He's standing resolved, right? He's not, giving in to Superman's, his little crusade that he's going on right now, right? So with the war in Atlantis, right? All the Justice League up there. You got Hulk Girl, you got Green Lantern, Shazam, Wonder Woman, and eventually when they're just like, they're actually apprehending Aquaman, the Kraken shows up, right? Now when this thing shows up, Superman, he just comes flying in, right? He comes flying in, he just like punches through the tentacle of this thing, right? Taking it out, right? So with that happening, we actually get Aquaman, right? And Aquaman, he has like Batman talking in his ear, right? He has Batman talking in his ear, and basically Batman is telling him, don't escalate the situation, right? Do not escalate the situation. So because he is unstable right now. He doesn't, he isn't, in his full faculties right now. He's unstable, right? I can't guarantee you that stuff is gonna end well if you, provoke this guy right now, right? So like Superman, he starts telling him like, yeah, like I called a ceasefire. Like what are you doing, right? So Aquaman, he like starts standing, he starts standing up to Superman, right? He's like, okay, you might have called that, but the sea is mine. That is all mine, okay? Your voice doesn't reach down there. You don't control nothing down there. I'm the king of the sea, okay? You wanna be king of all these surface people? Do that, okay? But the sea is mine. You can't have that, right? So with that happening, right, like Wonder Woman, she shows up, right, and basically she's telling them all of the Atlantean armies that Aquaman has, he's basically sending them onto the surface, right, basically sending them into all these different countries. And when Superman asks him like what this is, like what is he doing, Aquaman says it's a reminder, right? It's basically a show of strength, okay? Like you wanna sit here and try to take over all this different stuff. I'm gonna show you what kind of power we have down here, right? And eventually he tells him to get out, and Superman is getting ready to show him his own strength, right? So the first thing they do, right, Atlantis, right? In Atlantis, everything just starts like shaking, right? It's like a little mini earthquake under the water, right? And eventually we find out Superman and the Justice League yanked Atlantis out of the water, literally pulled it completely out of the water and dropped it in the Sahara Desert, right? So with that happening, right, Batman, he calls into Superman, right? And he's basically telling him he can't do that, right? Like he's threatening an entire kingdom. He can't do stuff like that, right? So Superman, he's like talking to him. He's like, okay, I heard what you were saying to Arthur, right? Yeah, like when you were talking to Aquaman in his ear, telling him not to provoke me and stuff. We heard that, right? So what we're gonna do? We're gonna take you out of our communications access, right? Like you will no longer be able to communicate with the Justice League, right? And he gets kicked out of the communications access by Cyborg, right? So with that happening, Wonder Woman goes to talk to Aquaman, right? So he's basically saying that he'll pull back his forces, stuff like that. And eventually he's like trying to convince Diana to keep Superman on the right path, right? Because he's falling down a very dark path very quickly, right? And she's gonna support it, right? Like she's not gonna tell him to stop. She's gonna make sure he keeps doing it, right? That's normally her role in these kind of stories. So eventually he's like, okay, I mean, yeah, that's fine, but if he does decide to become a king, tell him to come and see my council. Tell him to come and get tips from old Aquaman, right? I've been a king for years. I can give him some advice, stuff like that, right? And eventually he's like, okay, yeah, and tell him I'm sorry for what happened to Lois, right? So she ends up like going back to Superman, right? And she's like telling him like, yeah, he said he'll pull his armies in, stuff like that. So they're talking about sending Atlantis back to back to the bottom of the water, stuff like that. And eventually like he asked her is there anything else that he said, did he say anything else regarding any people who died, stuff like that, right? And she's like, no, she didn't tell him that he's sorry for what happened to Lois and like come and seek him as a counselor, all of his friendly words. She didn't tell him, right? Making it seem like Arthur isn't sympathizing with him pretty much, right? So we're gonna end the story here. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel, join Comic Book Cheese, and I will see y'all in the next one.